Welcome to Nancy Drew Book Reviews. Today I'm reviewing Nancy Drew Diaries number 5, Sabotage at Willow Woods. This book was released on January 7th, 2014. The book begins with Nancy at Boylestown with her friends Bess and George. Boylestown is having a big celebration because their high school football team just won the state championship. Nancy and her friends are there because Carrie Kim, George's cousin, is going to run for city council. George is extra grumpy because she hates sports and she doesn't like how everyone worships sports stars. While I agree it's unfair that sports ball players get millions and Nancy Drew YouTube reviewers do not, I find it just weird to read about George the athletic tomboy not liking sports. After all, in the last Nancy Drew book I read, George liked sports so much that she memorized contestants from the previous Olympic trials. Continuity! Carrie gives her speech, and she says if she wins the election, she will build a new football field for the high school. The crowd goes wild, which is great for Carrie's campaign. But as Carrie walks away, someone slips a threatening note into her hand. Dun 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 dun. Nancy and her friends examine the note. Not only does it smell like cigarettes, but it has the Boylestown Teachers Association logo printed on it. Either this is a red herring, or our culprit is a teacher who smokes. The next day, Nancy goes undercover as Katrina, a new student at Boylestown High. This may be the first time in history that a teenager actually wants to go to school. She stumbles upon the school's Green Club. They're protesting because the school would have to tear down half of Willow Woods in order to build the new football field. An enthusiastic student named Barney tries to get Nancy to join the club, and she agrees when she learns that the Green Club's sponsor is a teacher who smokes. That night, Carrie holds a fundraising dinner at the expensive yacht club. Nancy and her friends are invited to attend, and they meet Julia Jacobs, Carrie's campaign manager. Julia is doing a great job of politicking. That is to say, she is lying through her teeth in order to get donations and votes. The dinner doesn't go as planned. Someone hijacks the sound system and plays a fake clip of Carrie saying utterly horrible things like, "I don't listen to voters," and "I hate cheeseburgers." All of the rich sponsors immediately pick up their cheeseburgers and leave the building. Chapter 4 begins with a nightmare sequence. This is as good of a time as any to talk about the spacing in this book. Like the other entries in the Nancy Drew Diaries series, this book is double-spaced. I still maintain that this is a cheap trick to make the book twice as long. As such, I am automatically deducting 1 point from my final total. Now, the nightmare sequence makes things even worse. As you can see, the entire sequence is indented to the point that there is more margin than text on the page. This is another cheap trick to make the book longer than it actually is, and it just looks awful. Okay, back to the actual review. The next day, Nancy leaves school early to continue her investigation. I don't care if her last period was a free period. I hope Nancy gets detention for skipping school. Nancy talks with the Green Club sponsor, the teacher who smokes, and it turns out that the teacher is innocent. Nancy meets Barney again, and he introduces her to the Green Club president, Eloise Stromberg. Eloise is somewhat pushy, and she forces Nancy to do slam poetry as an entrance test for joining the Green Club. Fun fact! The United States Supreme Court also forces nominees to do slam poetry as part of the entrance test. Nancy is unexpectedly awesome at slam poetry, and Eloise tells Nancy a secret. The Green Club is going to do something illegal that night, to strike a blow for the environment. Needless to say, Nancy agrees to come along. On the election front, someone sends Carrie another threat and a dead squirrel, which is gross. Nancy brings Bess and George, Mirabelle and Jackie to the Green Club's nighttime meeting. With a dramatic speech, Eloise announces their illegal plan. The Green Club is going to egg a teacher's house. Sadly, the plan is foiled because nobody remembered to bring eggs. I have to admit, this entire section of the book is pretty hilarious. Bess and George are funny with their insistence on ridiculous cover stories. It's funny that Barney has a minor crush on Nancy, and it's funny how the Green Club is so serious about their mission. To finish off the humorous section, a boy recognizes George as the girl with the weird name, and accidentally blows her cover. Barney is depressed when he learns about Nancy's true identity, because this is like the third time he's had a crush on a girl who ended up being an undercover detective who was only nice to him because he was a suspect. It's okay, Barney. I feel your pain. Back at campaign headquarters, things are really bad. Carrie's campaign is unofficially bankrupt. All the funding and cheeseburgers have disappeared. Carrie wants to give up because the only group that still likes her is the high school football team, and none of them are old enough to vote. Carrie, that's why you shouldn't have started your campaign at a high school event. Just saying. As a last-ditch effort, Julia convinces Carrie to try a fundraising dinner with the football team. The dinner takes up the final third of the book. Nancy attends with her boyfriend, Ned. Things go badly immediately. Someone wrote a threat on the building in blood-red paint. The pressure gets to Julia, and she has a complete meltdown in front of the press. Nancy finds Barney lurking around the crime scene. He is there to work as a waiter for the event. Barney is still a little miffed that Nancy has a boyfriend, so he accidentally on purpose spills water on Ned's lap. Nancy writes out an apology to Barney and slips it into his hand. He writes a response which says he forgives her. Nancy instantly recognizes Barney's handwriting. It's the same handwriting from the threatening notes. Barney is the culprit! Nancy goes backstage to tell Carrie, but since Carrie is busy cleaning herself up in the bathroom, Nancy has to tell everything to Julia. Julia thanks Nancy, and she discreetly calls the police. The event begins, and the football players give their speeches. The police arrive and arrest Barney. He shouts for help from his Aunt Julia, and before you can say, "Wait a minute, Aunt Julia," Carrie suddenly goes missing. Nancy runs to the backstage bathroom. Carrie is locked inside, but Nancy unlocks the door using a credit card. A confrontation with Julia follows. Julia says that she is the mastermind behind the entire smear campaign. She has secretly hated Carrie for years now, because athletes like Carrie get everything handed to them on a silver platter, while the smart people like Julia get nothing. The final chapter skips ahead 3 months later. Carrie won the election, and instead of tearing down Willow Woods, she builds the new football field right on top of the old one. Gee, why didn't anyone think of that earlier? Nancy sees Barney at the ceremony and talks with him. Barney and Julia were both arrested and sent to trial. The judge is a fan of cruel irony, so he sentenced them to a community service program which brings sports to underprivileged communities. Julia is still angry, but Barney has learned to love sports. The book ends with everyone entering a ping pong tournament. Yes, even George, the great sports hater. Everybody loves ping pong! The end. Post-book follow-up. I'm a little disappointed by the ending of this book. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy cruel irony as much as the next guy, but the book clearly sympathizes with intellectual non-athletes, like George, Nancy, the teacher, and Barney. To some extent, even the culprit comes off as a sympathetic victim of our harsh, sports-obsessed society. To go from intellectual achievements are more important than sports to everyone likes sports now feels like a cheap cop-out. Now, you can argue that the book is trying to promote a pluralism of achievements where success comes when everyone discovers their own respective talents. This is seen when Barney discovers he can play hockey, Nancy discovers she is good at slam poetry, and Carrie, the tennis champion, discovers that she can be a successful politician. But while it's nice to have a moral of everyone is talented at something, it's not going to be a comfort to Boylestown's underpaid teachers who were fired because the school picked sports over education. Besides for the somewhat ambiguous moral, there's not much to say about this book other than to compliment it. I see little room for improvement. The storyline and pacing are well done, and readers will be able to zoom through it with eagerness. I particularly liked the funny chapters, and compared to the two-part series opener, I am so pleased with this book that I am willing to overlook its minor flaws and give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Whoops, wait a second. I said I would take away a point for the spacing issues. That makes my final score a 9 out of 10. Seriously, publishers, this is an 80-page book. Don't double space it into 160 pages.